My brother's wedding invitation never came. When I asked why, he laughed and said I wouldn't fit in. 2 weeks later, I opened my husband's garage door to grab garden supplies and found something that made my blood run cold, my brother's entire secret. Hi, I'm Sophia, and I'm 47 years old. I've always been the quiet sister, the one who worked double shifts at the hospital while my brother Jake built his fancy marketing company. I wasn't glamorous like his friends, didn't drive expensive cars or wear designer clothes. I lived in a modest house with my husband Mark, who ran a small construction business. We weren't rich, but we were honest, hard-working people. My family always treated me like I was invisible. At family dinners, Jake would talk about his business deals while everyone hung on his every word. When I'd share something about my work as a nurse, they'd nod politely and change the subject. I got used to being overlooked, being the practical sister who everyone called when they needed something but never invited to the important events. But here's what they didn't know about me. I notice everything. 23 years of nursing teaches you to see details others miss. I remember conversations, dates, inconsistencies. While everyone was busy admiring Jake's success, I was quietly connecting dots they didn't even know existed. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that subscribe button right now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This story is for everyone who's ever been underestimated. The wedding invitation drama started 3 months before Jake's big day. Every week, Mum would call with updates. The preparations, the venue, the caterer, the flowers. She'd go on for 20 minutes about how expensive everything was, how Jake wanted only the best for his bride-to-be, Melissa. Then one day she mentioned the guest list. It's going to be so intimate, Sophia, just close family and their dearest friends. Jake's keeping it very exclusive. I waited for my invitation. Weeks passed, nothing. Finally, I called Mum directly. When should I expect my invitation? Long pause. Oh, honey, didn't Jake talk to you? My stomach dropped. Talk to me about what? The wedding is, well, it's a very upscale affair. Black tie, very formal. Jake and Melissa felt it would be better to keep it to people who fit the atmosphere they're creating. Fit the atmosphere? You understand, don't you? It's nothing personal. It's just that you and Mark, well, you're more down-to-earth people. Jake didn't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. The words stung like ice water in my veins. I hung up and called Jake directly. He answered on the 4th ring, clearly annoyed. Look, Sophia, it's not about you personally. It's about the image we're trying to create. This wedding is important for my business. Potential clients will be there. I can't have what? I can't have my sister showing up in a Target dress while everyone else is wearing designer gowns. It would be embarrassing. The words hit like a physical slap. Embarrassing? Come on, you work at a hospital. Mark does construction. These people are corporate executives, entrepreneurs. We live in different worlds now. We're family, Jake. Family doesn't mean we have to pretend we're the same social class. Look, I'll take you and Mark out to dinner after the honeymoon. We can celebrate then, just us. After I told Mark, he was furious. His face turned red, and he slammed his coffee mug on the counter. 20 years I've been fixing things for your family. When your dad needed his deck rebuilt, who did it for free? When Jake's office flooded, who dropped everything to help with repairs? But something else bothered me, more than the rejection. During that phone call, I'd heard something in the background. Voices, machinery, the sound of work being done. Jake said he was at his office, but the sounds were wrong. They were coming from somewhere that echoed, somewhere large and empty, like a garage. The humiliations didn't stop with the wedding invitation. 2 weeks later, we ran into Jake and Melissa at the grocery store. I was in my scrubs, having just finished a 12-hour shift, grabbing milk and bread. Jake was in an expensive suit, Melissa wearing more jewelry than I owned in total. Sophia. Melissa's voice was sickeningly sweet. How lovely to see you. Are you still working at that place? The hospital, yes. Oh, right. The hospital. That must be so fulfilling, helping people and all that. She said it like I volunteered at a soup kitchen instead of being a registered nurse with 23 years of experience. Jake barely looked at me. We're picking up ingredients for our engagement party, catered of course, but Melissa wanted to add some personal touches. Another party I'm not invited to? I asked. Jake's face darkened. Sophia, we talked about this. It's a professional event. My business partners will be there. I'm your sister. And you'll always be my sister. But that doesn't mean you belong at every event in my life. The second humiliation came at Dad's birthday dinner. The whole family was there, except it wasn't really the whole family. Jake had invited his business partner Craig and his wife, while Mark and I were seated at the far end of the table like afterthoughts. The restaurant was one of those places with cloth napkins and servers who refill your water glass every 5 minutes. Throughout dinner, Jake dominated the conversation with stories about his latest contracts, his new clients, his expanding business. When I mentioned that I'd been chosen to train new nurses in the cardiac unit, a significant professional accomplishment, Jake cut me off mid-sentence. That's nice, Sophia. Hey, Craig, did I tell you about the Morrison account? 6-figure deal, all digital marketing? Dad smiled proudly at Jake, while I felt myself disappearing again. The weight of silence pressed down on me as conversations flowed around me, but never included me. But the worst humiliation came 3 weeks before Jake's wedding. I was at Mum's house helping her organize old photo albums when Jake stopped by unexpectedly. He was agitated, pacing around the living room like a caged animal. I need a favor, he said to Mum, ignoring me completely. Of course, honey. What do you need? Can I use your garage for storage? Just temporarily. I have some business materials that need to be kept secure, and my office doesn't have enough space. Why not use your own garage? Mum asked. Melissa's having it renovated. Designer is turning it into some kind of art studio. Very expensive, very delicate work. I can't have my stuff in the way. What kind of business materials? I asked. Jake's eyes snapped me like he'd forgotten I was there. Nothing you'd understand. Corporate documents, equipment, that sort of thing. I understand more than you think. Do you, Sophia? Do you understand contract negotiations, profit margins, corporate acquisitions? His voice was condescending, like he was talking to a child. I understand when someone is being evasive. Evasive? Jake laughed, but the sound was hollow. This is exactly why you weren't invited to the wedding. You always think there's some conspiracy, some hidden meaning. Sometimes things are exactly what they appear to be. But his laugh was wrong, forced. And when he mentioned the materials needing to be secure, something clicked in my memory. Those background sounds during our phone call, the way he'd been defensive about his success lately, the expensive lifestyle that seemed to have appeared overnight. 3 days later, Mark came home with interesting news. He'd been working on a renovation project and ran into Tommy Breslin, who did electrical work for several businesses in town. Funny thing, Sophia. Tommy mentioned he'd been doing some work for your brother's company, said Jake was paying cash for everything, which struck him as odd for a legitimate business. Most companies pay by check for tax purposes. Cash payments aren't necessarily suspicious. No, but what Tommy said next was, he said Jake's office building has been mostly empty for months. Other tenants moved out, but Jake's still paying rent on the entire floor. Tommy asked why he needed so much space for a small marketing company, and Jake got defensive, told him to stick to the electrical work. That night, I couldn't sleep. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed red in the darkness as I stared at the ceiling. Something about Jake's success had never added up. His company had grown too fast, his lifestyle had changed too dramatically, and now he needed secure storage for mysterious business materials. The pieces were forming a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore. What my family didn't know was that I'd always been good at reading people. 23 years of nursing doesn't just teach you about medicine, it teaches you about human nature. You learn to spot the signs when someone is lying about their pain level, when they're hiding addiction, when they're not telling you the whole truth about their symptoms. And lately, Jake had been showing all the signs. The expensive clothes appeared 6 months ago, right after he claimed his business had taken off. But I remembered the timeline. 6 months ago, Jake had been complaining about money, asking Dad for a loan to cover his office rent. Then suddenly, designer suits and talk of 6-figure deals. The cash payments Mark mentioned weren't just unusual, they were red flags. Legitimate businesses keep paper trails, they pay taxes on reported income. They don't operate in cash unless they're trying to hide something. But it was more than the money. It was Jake's behavior. The way he'd gotten defensive when I'd asked simple questions. the way he'd insisted on secure storage instead of just using a regular storage unit, the way he'd excluded me from family events right around the time his lifestyle changed. What they didn't know was that I'd been keeping track. Every inconsistent story, every timeline that didn't add up, every detail that felt wrong, I'd been writing it all down in a notebook I kept in my nursing bag, not because I was planning anything, but because something deep down told me I might need this information someday. I had dates, amounts, conversations, witnesses. Mark had unknowingly helped by mentioning his interactions with Jake, the contractors who'd worked on Jake's office, the suppliers who'd been paid in cash. They thought I was just the quiet sister who didn't ask questions. But I'd been asking questions all along, just not out loud. And now Jake wanted to store his business materials somewhere secure, somewhere private, somewhere he thought no one would look. The garage behind Mum's house wasn't the only storage space Jake had access to. Mark's construction business had its own garage, larger and more private. Jake had borrowed it before, back when we were still close. He still had the key. They thought I'd stay quiet and invisible forever, but they were about to learn that invisible people see everything. The ally I needed turned out to be closer than I'd realized. Mark had been watching Jake's behavior too, and he was more suspicious than he'd let on. I didn't want to worry you, Mark told me over coffee one morning. But Jake's been acting strange around the job sites. Last month he showed up at the Henderson renovation, asking detailed questions about security systems, cash transactions, how to move valuable items without leaving traces. What kind of questions? He wanted to know how contractors hide income from the IRS. Asked if I knew anyone who could transport expensive items discreetly. Said it was hypothetical, but the way he asked, it wasn't hypothetical. Mark pulled out his phone and showed me a text from Jake. The message was time-stamped from yesterday. Need garage space for 2 to 3 weeks. Business equipment. Can pay $500 cash. Don't mention to Sophia family drama, you understand. When did he send this? Yesterday. Right after your mum said yes to storing his stuff at her place? So Jake wasn't just using Mum's garage, he was planning to use ours too. Whatever he was hiding, it was big enough to need multiple locations. That evening, Mark's business partner Dave stopped by with more pieces of the puzzle. Dave worked with several local businesses and had his own suspicions about Jake's sudden success. Your brother's been asking around about property investments, Dave said. Specifically, properties being sold for cash, no financing. He wanted to know which real estate agents were flexible about documentation. Flexible how? The kind who don't ask too many questions about where the cash comes from. While Jake thought he was covering his tracks, he was actually creating a trail of witnesses, contractors, real estate agents, suppliers, people in Mark's network who talked to each other, who noticed patterns. But Jake's confidence was growing dangerous. At a family barbecue the weekend before his wedding, he was practically bragging. The smell of charcoal and the sound of sizzling meat filled the air as I stood near the grill, listening. Success isn't about working harder, he told Dad while I flipped burgers nearby. It's about working smarter, finding opportunities other people miss. What kind of opportunities? Dad asked. Let's just say there are ways to generate income that don't show up on traditional business reports, legal grey areas that most people are too scared to explore. Later, when Mum went inside to get dessert, Jake pulled Dad aside. I was close enough to overhear the evening air carrying their voices clearly. After the wedding, Melissa and I are looking at properties in Florida. Cash purchases. We might be relocating the business permanently. That's sudden. Sometimes you have to move fast when opportunities arise. The thing is, I might need to liquidate some assets quickly, convert inventory to cash. If anyone asks questions, what kind of questions? Just business questions. Tax questions. You can honestly say you don't know the details of my operations. Dad looked confused, but I understood. Jake was preparing his exit strategy, planning to disappear right after the wedding, and he was setting up his own father as an unwitting accomplice. The tension was building towards something that would happen soon, very soon. Tomorrow, Jake was supposed to move his first load of business materials into our garage. The next morning, I told Mark I had a migraine and couldn't work my shift. Instead, I positioned myself where I could watch our garage without being seen. The morning air was crisp, and I could taste the metallic anticipation on my tongue. Jake arrived at 10 a.m. in a rented van, not his usual car. He backed up to the garage and started unloading boxes. Dozens of them, all identical, all heavy enough that he struggled to carry them alone. But it was what I saw on the third box that made my heart stop. A shipping label. And on that label I could read the sender's name even from my hiding spot. Henderson Electronic Supply. Henderson Electronics, the same company that had been robbed 3 months ago. The news had covered it extensively because it was one of the largest thefts in the county's history. Over $200,000 worth of high-end electronics, computers, and equipment. The thieves had been professionals, the police said. They'd known exactly what to take and how to transport it without triggering security systems. The robbery had happened right around the time Jake's lifestyle changed. I watched Jake stack box after box in our garage, each one marked with Henderson Electronics labels. My brother wasn't just a thief. He was the mastermind behind the county's biggest robbery. When Jake finished and drove away, I waited exactly 10 minutes, the sound of his van fading into the distance. Then I called Mark. "Come home now. Don't ask questions, just come home." Mark arrived 20 minutes later to find me standing in our garage, surrounded by stolen electronics worth more than our house. "Jesus Christ, Sophia, what is this?" "This is Jake's business success. This is why I wasn't invited to the wedding. This is why he needed secure storage." Mark opened one of the boxes with shaking hands. Inside, brand new tablets, still in manufacturer packaging, with Henderson Electronics inventory stickers. "We have to call the police." "Not yet. If we call now, Jake will deny everything. He'll say someone planted this here, that we're trying to frame him out of jealousy. We need proof that connects him directly to this." I pulled out my phone and started recording everything. Every box, every label, every piece of evidence. Then I called my friend Janet, who worked dispatch at the police station. "Janet, I need a favor. Can you tell me if there are any updates on the Henderson Electronics case?" "Funny you should ask. They just got a new lead yesterday. Someone reported seeing electronics matching the stolen inventory being loaded into a rental van. They're setting up surveillance on storage facilities around town." "What kind of van?" "White Ford Transit. License plate starting with JKR." My blood went cold. JKR were Jake's initials. "Sophia, you still there?" "I'm here." "Janet, if someone had information about that case, how would they contact the investigating officer?" "Detective Morrison is lead on the case." "But Sophia, you sound strange. Is everything okay?" Before I could answer, I heard Jake's van pulling into our driveway again. The familiar rumble of the engine sent ice through my veins. "Mark, he's back. Get upstairs now." We watched from the bedroom window as Jake got out of the van, but this time he wasn't alone. 2 men I didn't recognize were with him, and they looked nervous, agitated. Their movements were quick, jerky. "We can't keep this stuff here much longer," one of them said, loud enough for us to hear. "The cops are getting too close." "Relax," Jake replied. "After tomorrow's wedding, we move everything to Florida. Cash buyers are already lined up. By next week, this will all be converted to clean money." "What about your family? Your sister works right here." Jake laughed, the sound carrying up to our window. "Sophia? She's clueless. Always has been. She doesn't suspect anything." The men started loading boxes back into the van. They were moving the evidence tonight. I looked at Mark. "Call Detective Morrison now. Tell him if he wants to catch the Henderson Electronics thieves, he needs to be at 247 Oak Street in 1 hour. "What about Jake?" "Jake made his choice when he decided I was too embarrassing to be his sister. Now he gets to see exactly how embarrassing I can be." As Mark made the call, I realized something that filled me with a strange sense of peace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was the one person who could bring down Jake's entire operation. Detective Morrison arrived with backup just as Jake and his associates were loading the last boxes. The red and blue lights painted our driveway in alternating colors. They were caught red-handed with over $200,000 worth of stolen electronics, and the rental van matched witness descriptions perfectly. Jake's face when he saw me standing with the police was something I'll never forget. Complete shock, then recognition, then rage. "You did this," he said as they put handcuffs on him. "You jealous, pathetic—" "I'm your sister," I interrupted, "and you're a thief." The investigation revealed everything. Jake's marketing company was a front. His expensive lifestyle was funded entirely by stolen goods. The Florida relocation was his escape plan, and the wedding was meant to be his last public appearance before disappearing. Melissa broke off the engagement when the story hit the news. Mum and Dad were devastated, but eventually admitted they'd ignored the warning signs because they wanted to believe in Jake's success. For once, their disappointment in Jake felt like vindication for me. I wasn't the family disappointment, I was the one who'd saved them from being accessories to his crimes. If you've ever been underestimated by your family, if you've ever been made to feel invisible or embarrassing, I want you to know something. Your quiet observation, your careful attention to detail, your ability to see what others miss, those aren't weaknesses, they're superpowers. Hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, have you ever had to expose a family member's lies? Where are you watching from today? I read every single comment, and your stories matter to me. Remember, sometimes the person they dismiss as just the quiet one is the person who's been paying attention all along.